So the group stage is over at this year's Women Euros. We're into the knockouts, and in this video we're going to be looking through all of the groups, looking at which teams deserve to get through, how those matchups are going to look for the quarterfinals, and what's excited us so far about this tournament, Harry. Let's start with Group A then. Give me a quick summary of your thoughts on Group A.
Group A, make it quick, that's a bit difficult, but I think I really enjoyed watching this group. I thought it was a very, very competitive four teams that all put up a decent fight in the majority of their games. Yes, even Iceland, who finished on 0 points, they only lost by a 1-goal margin against Finland and Norway, and they lost 2-0 to the host, which wasn't terrible. I think overall, very disappointing for Norway, for Iceland, sorry. Coming into this tournament, a lot of people expected them to do big things, and they have crashed out rather, poorly. They didn't play very well. They just didn't get the job done. And yes, they scored 3 goals against Norway, but that game was a dead rubber match that meant nothing for either side. And I think both sides had a little bit of fun, saying it was a 7-goal thriller. I thought that Finland and Switzerland, it was a brilliant fight, and it was great to see those two battle it out until the final game week. The fact that Finland are out feels really harsh, because I was mightily impressed with how they came into this tournament and how well they played against all 3 sides. And I think they'll be frustrated to be out of this competition, because I think they've probably played better than a certain side who managed to top this group. But well done to Switzerland as hosts. They've done well. They got the job done. They used the home crowd to their advantage. Late drama. Switzerland have delivered action at their home tournament. They scored 2 late goals against Iceland to win that game. A 92nd minute equaliser from Jamaili to get them through into the quarterfinals. And a massive moment for them. And yes, they've got to go and play Spain, but the fact they're in the quarterfinals is a good place to be. For Norway, lucky people, I have to say. They've not played very well. I think that they've scraped through in the majority of their matches. They've really struggled to get going. They went behind against both Switzerland and Iceland. Finland were the better side when they beat them, and it's just the way the goals have fallen. I mean, 2 own goals from own goal from in the Switzerland game, an own goal in the Finland game that massively helped them. Norway found a way to win, and yes, you have to give them credit for doing so. But I don't think the way they managed to get their results isn't sustainable, and I think they got a little bit fortunate to get out of the group. I think the thing that annoys me a little bit is they think that they topped the group, because for me they realistically shouldn't have done that. The fact they've taken 9 points from 9 astonishes me, because if you'd looked at the performances, I wouldn't have said they'd have taken 9 points.
No, I agree there. I don't think they've played particularly well, but they did finish 5 points ahead of anyone else in this group. They got the results over the line.
Yeah.
I think you can criticise Norway for their performances, definitely, and I think when they go on to face some of the top sides, that could be a problem. But they've got the star quality that got them through this group stage. And if we're looking at their quarterfinal matchup against Italy, they've got the players to make the difference again there. So as much as Norway have been really poor at this tournament and yet come away with 3 victories, I think there's still a lot of positives to look at. If you're a fan of Norway, they're still in a really decent position, I think, and the performance has been poor, but it can only get better, really. They can't play as badly as they have, surely, in the knockouts. So you never know with Norway whether they might just turn it on in the knockout stage, but they've got some work to do there. Touching on Iceland, really disappointing group stage. I think a lot of people expected a lot from them, ourselves included. Just never really got going. They played too defensive throughout. I think my biggest fear coming into this for Iceland, or one of my only ones actually, was their lack of moments where they would just send players forward. The fact their fullbacks sat deep, they never really got forwards. They were just too conservative in all their games, Iceland. They never went out to win. You look at their opener against, that opening game against Finland, they didn't really test Koivunen at all in the Finland net. There was a breakaway chance of Svina Jonsdottir, but she didn't ever look like scoring that. She just never looked comfortable going to strike it, and they didn't want to score, Iceland. They didn't want to come forward and attack teams. They got a few goals in that last game, didn't they, against Norway, but other than that, I thought a really disappointing group stage overall from Iceland. They'd have been hoping for a lot more. Against Switzerland, again, just didn't want to come forwards at all. So, yeah, really disappointing performance from Iceland. As for Finland, I feel so sorry for them. They should have beaten Norway. They should be through right now. But that's the way it goes sometimes with these international tournaments. They played really well in all three of their matches. That they won one, lost one, drew one. The Norway one they should never have lost. They were the better side throughout that, but Norway's quality prevailed there, and that's a shame really. Finland just didn't have a star player. I think that could have been Jutta Rantala, but obviously she was out for most of the tournament. Came off the bench to feature momentarily, but yeah, I think Finland lacked that sort of that game changer. And then Switzerland, Switzerland were really impressive, I thought, but again, just didn't quite get the results over the line. Should have beaten Norway in match week 1. That would have put them through by the time we got to match week 3. But yeah, so overall, I thought Group A was the tightest of them all. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's when sides are going through on goal difference, that shows how ridiculously tight it was. And just to echo the same point, I really feel for Finland because they were 4 minutes away from the quarterfinals. 4 minutes away, and even in the end, they only went out on goal difference. That is a tough one to take, but I thought they put on a good showing. But credit to Switzerland because again, they got the job done, and Norway. Credit to Switzerland and Norway. They got the job done. They got the points on the board, and they found themselves both into the quarterfinals.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's move on then to Group B. Let's go team by team with this one. We'll start with Spain. What a pointless endeavour this was.
Spain are good. If we didn't know it already, yeah. As we said, it's one of these with Spain. We didn't really learn much from this group stage. All we learned is that Spain are very, very good. They are much better than the 3 sides in their group. They can be tested sometimes when the opposition is of a higher quality, but overall they are a ridiculously strong team. That is all we learned. We already knew that, but a very professional group stage from Spain. High goal score. I mean, the volume of goals they scored was absolutely absurd. I thought anyone who played in the front 3 played very, very well. Even when the likes of Athenia came in the third match week, she still managed to get on the score sheet. And I think that Spain did exactly what they need to do. It was classy, it was professional, and it was exactly what I'd expect to see from the reigning world champions, and exactly what they wanted going into this tournament. They would have seen this group and they'd have gone, right, let's make this easy for ourselves. Go and get 9 points from 9. Get the job done, and in the end they went and did a demolition job on 2 of the 3 teams in this group. So a lot of credit to them. They got the job done when they needed to, and they they cruised through really into the quarterfinals.
Let's talk about the only real weakness in that Spain group. 3 goals conceded across the matches. Is that somewhat concerning for Spain?
Yeah, it's one of those where 3 goals, of course, people will sit there and say that's not a lot, but when you consider that 2 of them were against Belgium and 1 of them were against Italy, who aren't the kind of opposition we'd expect to see scoring against Spain, I think that it's something that Spain will be aware of, and it's something they've got to be careful of against higher opposition. The other thing to note and obviously to remember is that these goals, the reason they're a little bit more concerning is that they weren't consolation goals. It wasn't like Spain was 6-0 up and then Belgium scored 2. Belgium scored goals to equalise at 1-1 and then equalise at 2-2. Very similar to Italy. They didn't just score once Spain were 3-0 up. They scored to make it 1-1. So I think that it shows that there were periods in those games where the opposition did compete. And when you consider the quality of the opposition, I think that Spain will be disappointed. And I think that they've got to be a little bit tight at the back. And it's the risk when you get comfortable in a game and when you play ridiculously high that you are going to get caught out, but they have to be prepared to deal with that. All 3 goals came really in transition, especially the 2 goals against Belgium. One was a corner and one was a breakaway. So I think that Spain have just got to be careful that as we get into the knockouts, that they don't get caught high up the pitch and end up being caught in transition. If they can deal with the transition threat, then they'll have no problems whatsoever.
Yeah, no, I broadly agree. I think Spain are under, a crazy statement here, but Spain are really good at football. They play some really nice in possession stuff. I do think there's a little bit of a vulnerability to transitions, and I think that could be exploited by teams later in the tournament. But what we've seen from Spain is, regardless of whether they concede, 1 or even 2 goals in the first half, they seem to bounce back formidably. So, yeah, they've shown a bit of resolve. I think the other issue I'd have is a lack of dynamism from Tome. I thought there was a little bit of we've seen them play one system really well, but when they have to adjust against top opposition, how is that going to look? What are they going to do there? So I'll be intrigued to see what Spain do in those games. Overall, they're really impressive, and they shouldn't have any fears just yet. Switzerland in the next round, really nice tie. Italy then next, only 3 goals scored in the group stage, but they have got through with 4 points. Does that show a bit of an inability to see off games?
Yeah, it is concerning. Again, I think it is a bit of a stereotype of Italian football, isn't it? Where they, incredibly strong defensively, but need to start finding the back of the net. Because, again, to give them their flowers, I thought that in this group stage they defended superbly. They did very well against Belgium. Portugal, they did well until...
Just switched off at the end.
Yeah, they just switched off at the end. And to be fair, excuse me, against Spain, I thought that they did well for large portions of the match where they sat in and put up a good fight, especially in that first half. It is just about finding more goals. You don't win knockout games if you don't score. It's as simple as that. Yes, obviously they can't expect to draw every game 0-0 and go to penalties. I think they would have liked to score more. It probably could have been a little bit more comfortable for them as well. The fact that they've only taken 4 points just surprised me a little bit because they were much better than Portugal and should have never drawn that game. Spain, they did well to they put up a decent fight. Belgium, obviously, they did get the job done, but they needed more goals. They probably could have scored at least 3 against Portugal. That's the funny thing about it. So the fact that they didn't score more than 3 across the whole group stage is a bit of a surprise. But yeah, I thought Spain, it was a defensively solid group stage. They did well. They only conceded 4 goals. Is not, to be fair, it's pretty low compared to some teams at this tournament. But I think that they need to start doing better in the final third. But they got the job done, and fair play to them.
Yeah, good job from Italy. I think, the problem is for them, you look at Norway in the next round, and Italy are a decent side who can't get the job done, and that seems to be what Norway have really liked exploiting so far at this tournament. So we'll see how that plays out. Moving down the group, Belgium in third. I thought Belgium were really good at this group stage, actually. I think you look at the opener against Italy, and I think they'll be frustrated they didn't offer more of a battle. 44 minutes, so they fought well. They just never really looked capable of scoring a goal in that game, and that was the problem. Even once in the second half, they never really went for it at any moment. There's no moment when you went, oh, there we go, Belgium front on their attackers, they're going for a goal now, but that never happened. And then the Spain game, they gave a great fight again in the first half, but just didn't materialise in the second half, and they completely fell apart after the 4th goal for Spain. And Portugal, at the Portugal game, they were really good in. Portugal have been so poor at this tournament. The opener against Spain was horrific. The Italy game, Italy just switched off completely right towards the end of that match, and Portugal managed to get an equaliser to keep things alive into match week 3, but then lost in pretty poor fashion to Belgium. So a group stage to forget for Portugal. Decent one from Belgium. They'll be frustrated only that they didn't really put more of a fight against Italy and that they folded after a while against Spain. But overall, that rounds up Group B. Moving into Group C then, Harry, you've watched a lot of Sweden. We've had a lot of Swedish support in the live chat. Talk to me about their group stage.
Absolutely phenomenal. From start to finish, I thought that but what Sweden have done across the 3 games, they've shown us completely different levels, but also the ability to do such different things. What I mean by that is in match week 1 against Denmark, they showed that they've got that ability to just dig deep and find something out of nowhere. Yes, they were coming forwards, but nothing was really materialising for them. But they found that moment. Angeldal got that goal, and they got the win over the line. That's the kind of game where other teams wouldn't have come away with a win from that. But Sweden did well to just dig in, deal with any Denmark threat, and even though Denmark was sitting really deep, they found a way to score, and that was impressive to see them break down a very a side that sat very, very deep. And then I think in match week 2, they showed how they dealt very well with Poland's counter-attacking threat and then hit them even harder when they got caught up high at the pitch. It was a brilliant display in front of goal from the likes of Karneryd and Blackstenius and Aslani. Absolutely formidable in that Poland game. They looked really strong, and to be honest, I didn't think they could top that Poland performance. That was top tier. And then they went into match week 3, and yes, I think obviously there were circumstances for Germany. Obviously, the red card didn't help, and Germany are not playing very well right now. They're not the Germany that we're used to. But Sweden were absolutely superb, tore them apart. Germany started really well. First 5 minutes, they hit Sweden hard. They started fast. Obviously, they went 1-0 up. But the way that Sweden reacted, it became a very open game. And yes, that benefited Germany early doors, but in the end, it actually helped Sweden more. And they went on to get the equaliser. At 2-1, Germany lost their heads. I have no idea then what Vamsa was thinking to block Rolfo's shot that was going in, to save it with her arm, to get sent off, and then to give away the penalty, which in the end made it 3-1 anyway. So it was a completely pointless red card to pick
I think
up.
it was that instinctive reaction, wasn't it? You can see on her face immediately. She realises what she's done and she's frustrated. But yeah, it's just an unfortunate one, really.
Yeah, it was a really silly one. And now Germany in a very difficult spot. But I thought for Sweden, it was absolutely brilliant. And yes, that red card did change things. But if you take the red card away, and it would have been 3-1 Sweden at half time anyway. So I don't think it's fair to you can't say Sweden only won 4-1 because Germany had a red card, because that isn't the case. It was 3-1. It would have been 3-1 even if the red card hadn't have happened, because obviously Vamsa wouldn't have stopped Rolfo's goal going in and it would have counted anyway. So I think that Sweden were absolutely brilliant. It was such an open and expansive game, but in the final third they tore Germany apart. And in the transition, someone mentioned it, Knack and Minga had a really difficult time of just dealing with the pace of that Sweden front line. I thought having Rolfo and Eriksson back was absolutely vital. Hopefully Rolfo is going to be okay for the quarterfinals after she was brought off at half time and had heavy strapping on her right knee. But overall, a phenomenal group stage from Sweden, and I think they put themselves, in a lot of people's views, as right up there to go far at this tournament now.
Yeah, tough tie against England, but we'll get to that in a few days' time when we do our quarter-final preview. And let's move on to Germany then. You mentioned there that transition. They've really struggled in transition against Sweden. I think they've really struggled in transition overall at this tournament, Germany. Even Poland, who, while they couldn't score, troubled Germany massively. And they're not the strongest side, so I think that will be a concern for Germany. 5 goals scored, but 5 goals conceded. Obviously, that Sweden game leaving a dent in their goal difference. But they easily could have conceded against Poland. And both their goals came from individual moments. Against Denmark, they did concede, and their goals came from Danish mistakes. So I think Germany should count themselves incredibly fortunate to be in the position they're in, because they've not played well at this tournament. And I think there will be concerns over Christian Vuk's style. I called it in the first game that it was just too rigid. And I think they did alter it slightly in that Poland game, and that gave Jule Brand the space to create the goal she scored. But that still relied heavily on individual quality. So, yeah, I would be concerned about Germany going into a game against France. That's going to be incredibly tough. I think, looking at the way they've played, that they've been disappointing.
Yeah, as you say, Vuk has got to get it right. In the first 2 games, it was too slow and too rigid. In the last game, they just went for it, and it was way too open and just it was too fluid, and that was the problem. He just went to the complete other end of the spectrum. But I agree. I think that, again, obviously, give them credit. They got the job done, and the individuals pulled them through, a bit similar to Norway. But performance-wise, and when you consider factors, they went behind. Obviously, they were smashed by Sweden in match week 3. They went behind against Germany against Denmark, in the second game, and Poland could have easily scored at least 1 in that first game if it wasn't for Ann-Katrin Berger making some superb saves and Gwyn injuring herself to stop, for a goal-saving tackle. Suddenly, there was very feasible circumstances where Germany could have found themselves in a spot of bother here. Now, if they'd lost to Poland match week 1, then they probably would have played better. They probably would have been better against Denmark. If they had lost to Denmark, they probably would have played better against Sweden. So obviously, those circumstances can shift, and can vary. But I think that they will count themselves a little bit fortunate. As you say, they've got France up next. That is not a fun one. Vuk has to get it. Has got to really find a balance here between not being too open but not being too stagnant.
I think their style will translate better to those top opponents, or at least I thought it did. It didn't against Sweden, evidently, but when it comes down to games that matter, we'll see whether that reigns true. The other issue for Germany is Poland and Denmark were games they really struggled to compete in, but Poland couldn't lay a glove on Sweden, and Denmark never looked like scoring. So I think that will be a concern that Germany couldn't dispatch of those in more convincing fashion. On to Poland, really impressive debut tournament. I thought they could have got something against Germany. Sweden was a tough one. They really weren't able to play their football there. I think Nina Patton will be the first to admit she got it wrong first half, and that change she made at half time, making those more offensive subs, did give Payor more to link off, but it also left them a little more vulnerable. So that felt like a game they could never get anything from. And then obviously won in their final game week against Denmark, a very convincing victory as well. So I think Poland will be really, really proud of their efforts this summer. I think, they were unfairly brandished with the label of, they failed to score in their first two Euros matches. It's the first side to ever do that. I thought that's quite an unfair statistic given the level of opposition they were drawn against in this group stage. So overall, I think Poland can take immense pride from this. I think it'll be a tournament that really does kick on women's football in Poland. I think you've got now the real star in Eva Payor to carry that and be the beacon for the rest of the side. You've got some quality squad players in there as well. I thought they did really well, Poland. As for Denmark, nothing really went well here. I think just didn't quite get the goals in the opportune moments. By the match week 3, they weren't that bothered about the Poland result either way. But Poland wanted to win that more than Denmark. But the other two games just didn't compete well enough, I don't think, Denmark.
Yeah, I think that, to be fair, to only lose by a goal to nil against Sweden and to by 1 goal margin to Germany, I think
to Poland as well.
And to Poland, it's a really difficult one because I think the Germany game they could have definitely got something out of, and it was the penalty and then the clearing it into each other, and it just fell kindly for the Germans. I feel like Denmark were they've picked up 0 points, which is hard to believe because it's been very fine margins in every game, but. I don't think 0 points. I agree. I think they've been pretty disappointing, and they would have expected more from this tournament. And at the end of the day, they probably should have got more. But I feel 0 points is a little bit harsh. That doesn't reflect, the stuff they have done well at this tournament. As for Poland, I owe them a massive apology because I criticised them heavily for the fact they didn't pick up a point in qualifying and that they scraped through to get to this Euros. But fair enough, they've turned up and competed beautifully. The fact they're walking away from their first ever Euros with 3 points, 3 goals scored, they were, they gave the 8-time champions a very, very good game. I think a massive credit to them. I thought, a lot of, we saw Patalon, I think she got it right. Obviously, Payor was brilliant. We saw Padilla come in and step up for her nation as that player to link up with Payor. And across the board for Poland, massive credit to the squad because they came into this tournament as big underdogs and put on a brilliant show for their country and for the neutrals watching.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they should definitely be proud of themselves. Let's get into the last group then. We'll start with France. They won every game, France, so it's difficult to criticise them. I think what they've done very well is capitalise on others' mistakes, but do you think they've convinced you playing out from the back? Do you think you've been convinced by them in possession? Or has it just been their ability to turn the ball over and create from that?
We haven't really seen them have the ball, and that's the thing. And I think when they have had it, they haven't really done much with it. I agree. They've done very well at catching the opposition out and hitting them hard. And what we've seen from France, and we saw this in every single game, is that they have these bursts where against England, it was a bit of a balanced 30 minutes, but then 2 goals within 5 minutes, and they completely changed the game. Against Wales, they scored early, they went behind, they got one just before the half. Then the second half, they came out and got 2 goals very quickly. And again, we saw it against Netherlands. They were 2-1 down, and suddenly they scored 4 goals within the space of 20, 30 minutes, and they'd won the game 5-2. And what we've seen from France is these brilliant periods of time where they completely tear apart their opposition and just overwhelm them, score loads of goals and put them out of the game. And while that has worked in the group stage, it will be interesting to see whether it does work in the knockouts because because what we saw in those balanced moments when they weren't just scoring loads of goals was actually all the sides they played in the group gave them a good game. England scored a goal that was disallowed, that shouldn't have been, and then went and scored late on. Wales found an equaliser in those moments where it was a bit more even, and Netherlands obviously took the lead of the game and scored 2 goals. So I think for France, great that they're having these 10, 15 minute bouts where they just score loads of goals and look phenomenal. But if the rest of the 70 minutes is going to be an even game, that is a very risky way to play and get results.
Yeah, I think France-Germany's going to be such an odd matchup because neither side have any sort of consistency. Both rely heavily on just being able to outpower the opposition with their quality. So I think that'll be a really interesting one. Then whoever goes on to meet what is likely going to be Spain in the semi-finals is going to be up against it, you feel, at the moment. But we'll see what happens. I think France definitely one where they could kick into gear. Again, didn't watch much of the Netherlands game. We're watching England. But yeah, it just looks like, again, Netherlands were all over the place. We'll get to them in a minute. As for England, remarkable turnaround from that France game where a bit of sloppiness in the defence cost them. They've tweaked the tactics slightly, and they were formidable against the Netherlands and against Wales.
Yeah, 100%. As you say, England got and Wiegman got it slightly wrong, only a little bit wrong against France, but because that was France, they took massive advantage of that. And I think that it was really good to see that the squad and the nation, well, not like the team didn't overreact. They kept things calm. They played their way, made a couple of tweaks for the final two games, and they paid off massively. Absolutely tore apart the Netherlands, absolutely tore apart Wales, and really convincing stuff from England in both those games. Just come away with 10 goals, only concede one. It wasn't bad at all. As you say, it was a really, really good response. That's exactly what he needed just to get the nation back on side and to get everyone feeling positive about England once again. But really good stuff, very good reaction, and did well to get the job done in what were two must-win games. Obviously, the Wales game wasn't must-win in the end because Netherlands got trounced by France, but especially that Netherlands game, in a game that England had to win to stay in the tournament, to come out and win 4-0 was mightily impressive and a good showing of the character and the mentality of this squad. But yeah, full credit to Wiegman because her tactical tweaks were the reason that England went on to do brilliantly in those last two games. And as finishing second, I think, has actually probably put England on the nicer side of the draw. They avoid Germany, they avoid Spain. It's not a bad place to be.
No, Sweden's going to be a really tough one in the quarterfinals.
Yes.
But I think what we're seeing from England is the quality's definitely there. The problem is we've not seen them prove it yet against the top sides because Netherlands have been awful and Wales are not particularly good. So yeah, England were able to dominate those two sides. The concern will be the France game wasn't great, but I think the mitigating circumstance, that being the first game in England, changing since then, it's a bit of an unknown then for Sweden because how will England match up against better opposition? That's going to be a really interesting game. Join us for that on Thursday, I think.
Yeah.
Should be good. Let's move on to Netherlands. Just horrific, really.
Yeah.
Really, really poor throughout this tournament. They started well against Wales, but I don't think that's anything to be proud of. And then conceding 9 goals across 2 matches against England and France, just not good enough.
Yeah, and even that Wales game, it took them 47 minutes to score a goal, and that was a wonder strike from Miedema. Look at England and France scored very early doors against Wales. It took Netherlands ages to break them down and to find a way through. And I get that was the opening game, and Wales did have a bit more fight about them as it was their first debut game at a Euros. But still, that already set the tone for what felt like could be a difficult tournament for Netherlands, and they were embarrassed by England in that game. They didn't lay a finger on them, and I think the France one was even more disappointing because in the first half they started really well. They went they went behind, but they responded well, got into the lead, and then second half they just didn't walk out the tunnel. It feels like they might as well just not bothered. They might have just gone home at half time and just let France have a kick round by themselves because that. It's what it seemed to do in that second half. France were really clinical, to be fair, but they absolutely tore them apart. And as you say, an incredibly disappointing tournament for them. And Andreas Jonker, what a poor way to bow out as Netherlands boss, to get thumped by England and France, and to be knocked out of the Euros at the group stages. It's disappointing. Obviously, one of England, Netherlands, or France was always going to have to go out, and that was going to be disappointing for whichever nation. But it was the manner in which Netherlands had gone out of this tournament which is massively concerning. If they'd lost out on goal difference or by 1 point, then fair enough. But they were wellied by the other two teams.
I think the difficulty is, and then we saw this ahead of the tournament, is I think there was no belief in this Netherlands side from day dot. They came into this tournament with a manager they knew was going to be gone by the end of it. That's never conducive of success. Knowing obviously that the Andrea Verlink is coming in, the England assistant, but I don't think they were ever in a position where they were going to come into this tournament and do well. And I think we saw a lack of organisation against England and France, a lack of care, and they just fell apart. I just don't think there was ever any belief from the Dutch FA or from the Netherlands as a nation that they were going to come in and compete here. I think if there was, they wouldn't have announced that they were changing their manager before a major international tournament.
Yeah.
But as soon as they did that, they threw away any real chance. Jonker clearly is done with the role. He can't be bothered now that he's gone. And yeah, I just Netherlands really failed to offer anything. As for Wales, we'll finish with them. They were beaten well and truly in every match, but 2 goals scored. I think moments that they can cherish, the Welsh, and for the young girls watching, that's really important. But I think overall we saw Wales having a lesser quality, really.
Yeah, they showed sparks, but in your first ever tournament, was it a tournament too early? Maybe, but the group they've got was really difficult. I would have been really interested to see how Wales would have fared in Group A, for example, against sides that are a little bit closer to their quality. But it was always Wales were always up against it once this group stage draw came out, and I think that, as you say, the fact they scored 2 goals, they got a goal against England as well, which I'm sure they'll love. But overall, I think it was just this tournament for Wales was more about what it can offer off the pitch than the actual performance on it. What it's done off the pitch. I mean, the support in Switzerland was absolutely phenomenal. I'm sure there was a lot of support back home in Wales as well. And hopefully it's going to have a massive impact on the women's game in Wales. But I think that was the overall women's football picture for Wales is more what they should take from this tournament rather than the actual results. We knew they were going to get up against it. But the fact that the likes of Fishlock and Kane are going out there, scoring goals for their nation and inspiring people, I think has to be the main takeaway for Wales, because this tournament, debut tournament, was a massive moment in their history. And the fact they went out and scored a couple goals and the fans had a great time in Switzerland, I think that's the main thing, really.
Yeah, definitely. So that does round up this 2025 Women's Euros group stage. We'll be back in a few days to preview the quarter-finals. That live will be out Tuesday or Wednesday ahead of the quarter-finals starting on Wednesday. Should be good, Harry. We kick off proceedings with Italy versus Norway. So join us for that live stream on Wednesday as we continue providing live coverage of every match at this summer's Euros. It's been a great tournament so far. Today's the first day in what feels like forever that we're not live twice or at least once. So yeah, enjoy an evening without us. We'll be back on Wednesday for more Women's Euros action. So that is everything from us today. Thank you guys very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.